Thank you for inviting me. Let me share my personal views on where does Greece's financial future stand. It's a very ambitious, very big question, by the way. So I'll try to say I can only scratch the surface of that question, but I give you my personal thoughts, not necessarily those of the ECB Council or board. I will focus on the banking system and the role it plays in the macroeconomy. And I think that the key point I want to make can be captured by an old Byzantine proverb, and I'll try to say it in Greek. It says, that proverb says, "Dani se alefri se opion echistari." So it says, lend flour to anyone who has wheat. So this is about lend to anyone who has the capacity to repay. I think that is the key point of that old proverb. And there have been more modern versions of that proverb that think of Mark Twain's point on, the only people that a bank will loan money to is the very people who do not need it. That's not exactly what I mean here. Has a different meaning. What I mean has to do with sound credit allocation, with being forward-looking and with sound and sustainable economic growth. So let me structure my thoughts around, say, achievements and challenges, and I'll have to be very selective there. On achievements, when we look back at the past few years, it's clear that important reforms have been implemented that strengthen the foundation for economic growth in Greece. So I think there's been a lot of achievement. The business environment has become more enterprise friendly. Public sector financial management has improved. The economy has become more digitalized. Just some examples of areas where clear progress has been made. Focusing on the financial sector, a key reform in my view has been the introduction of a single unified framework for insolvency. I think that's a key point because that should speed up private debt restructuring, and it should give over-indebted households and firms the chance to make a fresh start and to get rid of the burden of the past. Now, in addition to those, say, government-driven reforms, of course, and it has been mentioned by others as well, banks have made a lot of progress, and everyone knows this now. It took a while, but when you compare, say, the NPL reduction on bank balance sheets since the peak in early 2016, that has been a massive decline, right? We're talking about 91 billion of NPL reduction. And that's around half of Greece's GDP when you look at the nominal GDP of Greece last year. So we're at something like 17, 18 billion NPLs now on bank balance sheets. So it's clear that these are real achievements, and I think that all stakeholders deserve praise for that, especially the Greek authorities and the Greek banks. Now, there are, of course, always challenges, and let me say a few words on those and where I think are the main challenges. Starting with, say, the more structural, the broader economic environment, I think that the Greek RRP addresses the key structural challenges in the right way. So I think that reforms need to continue to raise productivity growth, raise investment growth in a sustainable way, addressing also the demographic challenge. And one should do that by making the economy more open, more flexible, more competitive, very much in line with what, say, are the overarching objectives of the Greek RRP. Now, in addition to that, of course, there is the need to ensure public debt sustainability, as has been mentioned before as well, also given the government's aim to regain investment grade. Now, on the banking side, further progress in strengthening bank balance sheet remains the overarching priority, in my view. On NPLs, it's clear the finish line is in sight, but we're not yet fully there. We still have around, an NPL ratio of around 12% of the total loan portfolio. That is still the highest in Europe. And we need to continue working on that to address that further. Also with an eye on the risk of possibly new inflows of NPLs. Those inflows could pick up once policy support is being withdrawn. And we all know that the economy is hit by important shocks and that the future is uncertain. Now, one point I want to emphasize is that the health of the banking system goes hand in hand with the economic environment in which the banks operate. So we still have, and Julia mentioned this as well, we have a lot of, vulnerable companies especially in the SME segment, that are there and that imply that NPLs can quickly return after another downturn. So I think there that the commitment of the Greek authorities to continue with their ambitious growth and reform agenda to strengthen the business environment is really important here. It's a very good thing. A related issue, I think, is the large amount of private sector debt that remains in the economy. And it depends a little bit on what you count in, but we're talking about something like 220 billion of debt that is in there on the balance sheets of the non-financial private sector. Around 100 billion of that is non-performing debt. It's around 55% of GDP. That's a big amount, and that's still on the books of private borrowers. Credit servicing firms manage that. It's not anymore in the banking system, but it continues to be there. And there are signs that the collection of those loans remains challenging. Now, why is that so important? It's important because that burden continues to be a drag on the real economy. Even if they're not anymore in the banking system, they need to be serviced. And they complicate the access to financing, to bank financing of those debtors. So and those debtors get risk of getting stuck in that situation. So I think that, in other words, that debt overhang undermines economic growth and exposes indebted households and firms to adverse shocks. So I think it's important to address that. And there are particular pockets of that debt that are difficult. I'm thinking there especially of the debt that has been outstanding, has been non-performing for a very long time. The longer the debt is outstanding, the more difficult it becomes to resolve it. I'm also thinking of debt that is outstanding to multiple banks, to multiple creditors. That entails a coordination problem. It's more difficult to resolve. And maybe a third example is the debt to small companies. Small companies that are vulnerable to rising input prices at the moment, and it's important to address that and to keep an eye on the economic situation in the smaller firms that are so important for the Greek economy and including their indebtedness. So let me conclude. And let me conclude by basically repeating the three main takeaways, the main points I want to make. First, in my view, Greece's financial future has clearly improved over the last few years. I think in challenging economic circumstances, the Greek authorities have pushed through with a reform agenda that has strengthened the Greek economy and its banking system. That's the first point. Second point, strengthening the banking system and strengthening the real economy go hand in hand. So to address the NPL challenge once and for all, it's important, and to avoid new waves of NPLs in the future after future downturns, it's crucial to further strengthen that business environment. And the Greek authorities, of course, are very well aware of that and are working on that. So that's very good. And then the third, final point, I think it's important to have a strategy of restructuring distressed debt for that non-financial private sector that I mentioned, something that complements the reduction of the NPL process in the banking system. One ingredient that is definitely there, that should be there, is the modernization and the strengthening of the capacity of the court system. Another element is the sales and leaseback, the so-called sales and leaseback organization, to protect the most vulnerable debtors. That should be part of that as well. All things that I think the authorities are very well aware of, but I think that those are the points I want to make. Thank you very much.